Hey, this is the World Advice Channel 2. What I want to talk about today is the problem with Dr. Umar Johnson. So, for anyone who's in the black community, particularly the more Afrocentric part of black community, it's probably just about a guarantee at this point you've heard of Dr. Umar Johnson in one way, shape, or form, okay? He's a popular black activist who talks about fighting for black rights and so on and so forth for his content. And it may seem that what he's doing is good, but what he's doing, in all honesty, is actually kind of toxic. And that's what I'll be talking about for this video today. So now I mentioned that, let's get started. So when it comes to the problem with Dr. Umar Johnson, okay, is it simply down to the fact that Dr. Umar Johnson is taking a road that a lot of black activists make, which is the problem with him, which is the whole let's blame white people for everything thing. Now, when it comes to this whole let's blame white people for everything thing, the truth of the matter is this is something that is very problematic in the black community, and Dr. Umar Johnson is simply another problem with it. Because the truth of the matter, when it comes to people like Dr. Umar Johnson, for that matter, okay, the truth is that when you watch a lot of his clips and a lot of things he talks about, it's always let's blame white people for everything. It's always white people, white people, white people, white people. And don't get it twisted for a second, okay? Anyone who's a real black person, I think has kind of realized that white people do sabotage shit sometimes when we are actually seeing success and actually getting somewhere. And I don't get me wrong, I know that for a fact. But the truth of the matter is, at the same time, you also have to take something else into consideration. That even though, yes, white people do sabotage shit and have been caught doing this numerous times before, and they're still trying to do it today, such as obviously things like Tulsa, Oklahoma, and so on and so forth, the truth of the matter is you also need to take something else into consideration that's also very true, is that black people also need to realize that most of our problems is actually our own fault for it. Okay? On a collective level, it is mostly our fault for it. Because the truth of the matter is, as anyone who knows anything about the world, and let alone common sense for that matter, there's easily over 40 something million African Americans in America, okay? There's 40 million African Americans, okay? Truth be told, 40 million plus African Americans. And if African Americans in general, as a whole, how many of us are there were to do the right things when it comes to being able to be progressive, like for example, when we have to go places like show up on time, when we set up businesses and so on and so forth, we charge at reasonable prices and not overcharge things and so on and so forth, and all the type of stuff that actually prevents us from seeing success in a black community when we set up business and stuff. With how many people there are out there, there's no way you're telling me white people can sabotage everything. There's so many black communities and so on and so forth that are possible and already exist because of 40 plus something million black people. To think that white people could sabotage and just raid towns and so on and so forth is simply impractical, okay? Not to mention you also have to take something else into consideration. We also have TV media nowadays as well as YouTube. So anytime something could happen like that, it could be broadcast across the entire planet so the whole world would know. And we could have people from anywhere from India, China, Japan, all across the world, people who in a lot of cases, for that matter, people's more like for that matter, who we kind of would imagine could care less about us would actually start coming out of nowhere and saying, "Hey, why are you guys doing that shit to them? They're actually doing everything right for that matter, okay? Why are you guys terrorizing and attacking their cities and towns, and so on and so forth when they're actually trying to be progressive and develop? You know how much shit white people would get in for that matter? For that matter, to be honest with you, a lot. And that could absolutely affect their image worldwide for that matter, okay? So the idea that white people could do the things that they did in the past is simply false. They couldn't do it, and if there were, there'd be such a massive backlash against them. When it comes to the whites in America, particularly with the fact that America, surprise, 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 is known for getting in other people's business anyway in other parts of the world, whether it could be in India, China, Japan, South Asia, and other parts of the world for that matter. it would make them look even worse when they get in other people's business, when you look at how they treat their own minority population in the United States. So they would get a lot of shit. So they obviously would not do that stuff like they used to do in the past, okay, for that matter, okay? So the truth of the matter is, that would not happen in 2024, okay? If the majority of black people were doing the right thing, you know, the truth is they couldn't do that stuff in the past. And that's what people like Dr. Umar Johnson don't seem to understand and realize. It's always let's blame white people for everything and this and that. And let's avoid taking accountability, as well as some of his toxic views on things, like his hatred for Drake, even, yeah, and not even just hatred for Drake, just his general dislike for Black Canadians, just kind of defeats the purpose if you're trying to be someone who is for Black rights and stuff like that, you know, and Black liberation, because we need as much help as possible. And now, just aside from that, just his views on like this whole way of thinking that every time a Black person does something wrong, which is so outdated, it's not even funny, you know, like his video he made about, you know, why did this black guy take it when Megan Thee Stallion was being insulted by a white guy, which was so stupid. Like that's something, sounds like something you would hear in like fucking 2004, for crying out loud. That is so outdated. Just because a black person is getting picked on by a white person doesn't mean as a black person, you know, I have to get involved in a situation. That is so outdated and is so ridiculously old for that matter, and flawed. It's not even funny for that matter, okay? You know, because that way of thinking is so stupid. You know, like just because a black person is having a problem with a white person is giving a black person a problem, does it mean even if the black person is in the wrong that I punch him in the face? No, because look at Megan Thee Stallion and look at the career she made and all the things she talks about. She brings all the hate on herself, and that's exactly what I'm trying to get across here. His views are so outdated when it comes to this whole issue. Like this is 2024, not fucking 500 BC. You know, like we don't have to think in that same type of tribal primitive way that humans across the world in the past used to think like, okay? We don't have to think like that anymore. This is 2024. What we need is we need people who are actually going to represent us and make us look good, and surprise, 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 actually going to take accountability for our own problems and help develop ourselves, for that matter. If we develop ourselves, it's not like anyone can do anything like they used to do in the past. Because the truth of the matter is, most of the problems in the black community is our own fault. It is simply down to our own fault, okay? We've seen this happen numerous times, even in Africa. The whites left, you know what happened? The complete nation went to shit, okay? And even though they bring up all this different stuff, oh, the IMF and this and that, even at then, a lot of those things is simply down to black people. Just like, why do black business owners in South Africa do so terrible? Let alone all the other parts of Africa for that matter, okay? Why do they do so bad? Because they're simply not organized. They're not organized. You tell them to get something, they don't get it. They overcharge everything and so on and so forth. What the hell does that have to do with the IMF? And that's exactly the point I'm trying to get across here. Most of our problems is actually our own fault. It has nothing, nothing to do with white people, okay? They do contribute and they do sabotage shit. They ain't slick. I think we caught onto it. Absolutely, I'm certain. But for the most part, most of our issues is actually our own fault for that. Okay? We can't just play this whole card game. Oh, let's blame white people for everything and this and that. That might have made sense like 60, 70, 100 years ago, but now it has nothing to do with that. It's mostly our own people's fault. So that's the truth of the matter. So anyway, this is my video. I hope you enjoyed it. And just remember, if you know, like this video and videos like this, remember to thumbs this video up and hit the subscribe button. And this is all to say, and simply I'm out. So bye.